Good morning. I want to invite you to Mark, the 8th chapter this morning, please. Mark chapter 8, if you'll open there. We're going to read together, beginning in verse 34 of that chapter. Mark chapter 8, verse 34. And Jesus summoned the multitude with his disciples, and he said to them, "If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life shall lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's shall save it." I want to stop there for just a second. We're going to read on, but I just want to stop there a moment and let us absorb what Jesus has just said. Because I would expect that his words in those two verses were very impactful on the people to whom he was speaking. Here is a great multitude that are following Jesus. Lots of people. And lots of people have made considerable sacrifice to follow him. They've left their cities, they've left the towns, they're following him around in the wilderness, in desert regions around the sea. And so they've made a sizable commitment. Frequently we've read about the people following Jesus in the Gospels and them not taking thought for like what to eat for the day. So like they didn't pack sack lunches. They just heard he was around and they just left their villages and they flocked out to come and see him. And so here are the kinds of people that are following and that are listening to Jesus. And he wants to call to their attention the kind of all-in mindset that is required if they're going to be a disciple. He wants to call to their attention the kind of total surrender that he's expecting of those that are going to be his followers. He wants to prepare them for what they're about to see in him. Because he is going to Jerusalem, and here are people that are following him to Jerusalem. And when they get there for the Feast of Passover, they are going to witness things that they would not have expected of the Messiah who's come into the world. They are not going to see him take a throne when he gets to Jerusalem. They are not going to see him come to Jerusalem and on the day after Passover find that the Roman government has fallen and that now the Jewish people are now supreme and the Jewish king is now the king of all the earth. They're not going to see that happen. They're going to go to Jerusalem and they're going to see the one that they've trusted, the person that they've heard speak, the one that they're persuaded is the Son of David, is the Son of God. They're going to come to Jerusalem and they're going to see him humiliated. And they're going to be humiliated because their Messiah is humiliated. They're going to see him shamed and they're going to feel shame because they and this man in whom they've trusted has made a spectacle to the world. They're going to see him bruised and bloodied and whipped and crucified. And all of that's going to be very troubling to them. Not just because of what they see in him, but because of what the implications of that suffering are for them. If this is what happens to our king, then what will become of us? If this is what God requires of him, what does God want of us? And what Jesus says in these couple of verses is that what God wants from us is an all-in commitment. What God wants from us is to make our affection and our allegiance to him the thing that is first, that is biggest in our life. He says again, read with me in verse 34, "If anyone wishes to come after me." Does that include you and me? Anyone? I mean, that's all of us, right? "If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself." So where do I fall in terms of the scale of importance? I'm at the bottom. I mean, he's more important than me. He's more important than everything. "Let him deny himself and take up his cross." And this is not a golden, gilded cross. This is not a pretty cross. This is an implement of execution. This is the electric chair. This is lethal injection of that day. This is the guillotine. This is the noose. This is the cross. Let him take up the thing that he will die on and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life shall lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's shall find it. The verses that follow might be my favorite verses in all the Bible because of how they boil down life to what really matters. Listen to what he says next to help us with the all-in, total surrender commitment that Jesus wants of us. He says, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what will a man give in exchange for his soul?" He asks two questions there that are designed for us to take stock of what really matters in life, of what it is that has real value. And the way he does that is he sets up for us a scale. And in this scale, or on this balance, he puts on one side the world, and he puts on the other side of the scale or the balance our soul. And he asks this insightful question: What shall it profit a man if he gain all of this, if he gain the whole world, and he loses this, he loses his soul? Now, do you appreciate why that question is so insightful? We all know that we all have in us the notion of profit and loss, of what it means to gain something and what it means to lose something. We have in us the sense of relative values of what's worth something and what's not worth something, what's worth something and what's worthless. And Jesus says, if you put the whole world over on this side and you put just one soul over on this side of the scale, guess which way it tilts? It's not this way. It tilts this way. One soul, your soul, my soul, is worth more than everything that's in the world. Everything. You see, that's why we can give stuff up. That's why we can wear a cross. That's the reason why we can suffer the loss of things, or of friendships, or of fame, or of power, or of pleasure. That's the reason we can give up things, is because if you had everything that's in the world and you lose your soul in the pursuit of that, you have lost the only thing that's worth anything. And you have gained absolutely nothing in the pursuit of whatever that was in the world. Because the world, in comparison to one soul, is not worth anything. Now, what I love about that question is how it reduces all that is important in life. Can we turn that thing off? Everybody's looking up there. Is there any way to get rid of that, Ralph? Listen, okay? Don't look up there. It's not important. That doesn't matter. It's not worth anything, okay? Your soul, that's what's worth something. All that is in the world doesn't compare to just one soul, and this is how that helps me. It helps me think about what I'm doing today. What am I pursuing right now? What am I after? What do I want? What business am I about this week? What am I thinking about? What are my habits? What are my goals in life? What are my aims? Because my soul is the only thing that matters. Now, it doesn't matter how important or unimportant you are. It doesn't matter if you're the President of the United States. It doesn't matter if you're the Speaker of the House. It doesn't matter if you come from a regal line, if you descend from kings and queens. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have wealth in your bank account. It doesn't matter if you have riches buried in your backyard. It doesn't matter how famous you are, how infamous you are. It does not matter how many degrees you have appended to your name. And it doesn't matter how lowly you are. It doesn't matter if nobody knows who you are, if you have $0 in your bank account, if you are completely underwater with your house or with your car or whatever it is that you own. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what crimes you've committed in your life. The only thing that you have and the only thing that I have, and the only thing anyone has in their possession, whether they are famous or whether they are infamous, whether they're rich or they're poor, the only thing that you have of value in your possession is your soul. That is it. Nothing else. You are not taking your house with you, and you're not taking your bank account with you, and you are not taking your degrees and showing them to God in heaven. You're not going to call all of these people up as witnesses to say that he's a good guy or he's a great person or he's someone I really like. Those friendships and those affiliations aren't going to matter when you stand before God. The only thing that you and I have that really matters is our soul. That's it. It's the only thing that we come into the world with that's eternal. It's the only thing that we ever have in the course of our life that is going to last forever. And it's the only thing that we'll exit this life with is our soul. And the one thing that will be the measurement of the value of our life is what we do with that in the course of our time here. Of what kind of shape our soul is in when this life is over with. Isn't that simple? Out of all the things that you have to worry about today, the only thing that you really have to worry about is your soul. That's it. Isn't that simple? Out of all the things that you really need to think about right now, and the things that you need to focus on, we can narrow that down very quickly to the thing that deserves the first priority, and that's your soul. That is it. Nothing else matters. That's it. And if I should die today, if God should see fit to take me today, then it doesn't matter how much wealth I have or don't have. Doesn't matter if I have nothing. It doesn't matter who knows my name or who doesn't know my name. If I have nothing and I have nobody when this life is over with, but my soul is right with God, then I have won at the thing that mattered in life. And my situation is as good as it could be for all eternity. I have accomplished the kind of legacy that is the best legacy that that anyone who's been created by God can accomplish. And that's to have my soul right with God. That's all that matters. Oh, that if we could just get the world to believe that, to submit to that, to experience that. Oh, that we could just get the folks here. I mean, just within these four walls. If we could just practice that, if we could just believe that, if we could just sow that in our kids, then we will have accomplished what life is all about. I want to challenge for just a couple moments that just the notion of value in terms of the worth of your soul versus the things that are in the world. Think for a moment about the things that are in the world. And I want to tease your mind just a little bit to think about what all is in the world that Jesus says is of less value than your soul. What if you had unprecedented wealth? I mean, what if you had 7 zeros after whatever the dollar figure is of what's in your bank account? What if that was at your disposal? What if you had a home that was here in Shelby County, but you had another home that was over in Ireland, or a place a country place out in somewhere in London, in the London area? What if you vacationed on your own private isle in the Bahamas? What if you just had to worry when you went there about where it was you were going to fly your jet? I mean, that you had a landing strip when you got there. What if you could just say to your wife when she goes Christmas shopping, you don't even worry about what you spend. Just go spend. What if you didn't have to worry about what it's going to cost to send your kids to school? They could be educated in all the best places. What if businesses came to you because they wanted you to legitimize whatever product they were trying to market, and so they wanted your financial backing, or they just wanted your name as one of their partners? What if nations came to you and wanted you to bail them out of their economy, out of whatever troubles they were in? I mean, what if you had that kind of wealth at your disposal? Well, we know, don't we? The stories of so many people who've had so much and yet found that so much that they possess to be such vanity. Solomon said it was striving after wind when he had wealth and when he had gardens and when he had servants and when he had abundance of possessions. And when people came to see all of his storehouses of the wealth that he had. And the Queen of Sheba said, the half has not been told. And yet in the pursuit of all of that, they forgot the one thing that mattered. And that was their soul. But listen, folks, please listen carefully here about what doesn't make sense. You see, you and I know that if you were to pursue wealth to the nth degree, if you were to have a great abundance and not think of your soul in the pursuit of that, we know how foolish that would be. But here's what doesn't make any sense at all. Is how we will work and how we will sweat and how we will wring our hands and how we will be anxious and how all of us will go to work. I mean, the daddy and the mommy and everyone in the house, and how we will work overtime and how we will get ourselves into debt and how we will get ourselves underwater. Not so that we can be as wealthy as Solomon. Not so that we can have a tower named after us. Not so that we can have a place in the Bahamas. But this is what doesn't make any sense, just so we can be middle class. Now that is foolish, is it not? It's not so we can have the whole pie, it's just so we can have a little bitty sliver. That makes no sense at all. And yet that's the American dream. Having stuff, pursuing things, all to the detriment of our soul. Now, let's take another example. Let's take, instead of wealth, because wealth isn't the only thing that's in the world, pleasure is in the world too. But I want to take off the table for our consideration this morning any kind of sinful pleasure. I want to eliminate pleasures that are wrong in and of themselves and just think for a moment about pleasures that are not wrong in and of themselves. What do you really love to do? I mean, what's your favorite hobby? Do you like to fish? Do you like to hunt? Do you like to travel? Do you like to garden? What if you could do whatever it is your innocent pleasure, whatever it is that it's not a sinful indulgence, what if you could just do it to the utmost? So you could go and you could fish all the great fishing holes of the world. And you could catch whatever it was that you wanted to catch, and you could find the best guide, and you could get the best boat, and you could find the best fishing spot. And you could mount whatever it was that you catched, or take pictures of it and shoot videos, whatever you wanted to do, of whatever it is that was your passion, whatever it was that was your sport. I love to garden, and I haven't done much of it. But I love to do it, and it harkens back to things that I loved to do when I was a kid. I loved the big garden that we had in the backyard. I loved our asparagus bed, and I loved the fruit trees that we planted, and I enjoyed collecting the potatoes, and I even enjoyed pulling the weeds. I liked working in the earth. It was fun. And what if you could just do that to the nth? I mean, what if you could just indulge your heart in doing the things that you really love to do? Well, if you did that, I mean, if you had a life full of fun and adventure your whole life, and there are folks that are able to do that. What if you could spend your whole life pursuing the things that you love to do? And when you look back on your life, there was just great happiness because you had seen so many places and you had so many pictures of where you'd been and you had so many sweet memories of things that you saw and things that you did and things that you made. But there was nothing for God in all of that. How foolish and how vain that would be. Because where are all those big fish going to be in eternity? And where are all those pretty gardens and flowers that we planted? And what about the pictures on the walls of all the places that we've been across the world? Where are those going to be in eternity? When we've missed out on the biggest adventure of all. And that's what we do with our soul before God. There was a group of us that went fishing when we lived in Houston. We went out, it was my first time ever out on the Gulf. And we were going to leave. We were going to leave from Houston, go down to Freeport to take a boat out. There was 6 of us that were going. And we got up at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. Now, isn't that ridiculous? But we did that. We got up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And we made the 2-hour trip down to Freeport. We all packed our lunches. We had all of these big ice chests that were loaded down with ice for the catch that we knew we were going to get a red snapper. And we were drowsy trying to make the drive down to Freeport. We were all taking Dramamine so that we wouldn't get sick. And there were predictions that there were going to be 6-foot seas that day. But we went anyway. We got down there and we stood looking at the boats, and this is in the port, just going like this. And we stood there looking at the water as if somehow we could will it to be still. And it never was. So we got back in the truck and we headed back to Houston, and we didn't go fishing that day. But if you asked every one of those guys the next weekend if they wanted to go, they all would have done the same thing all over again, even if it meant that they didn't get to go. Now here's the thing. Here's the self-indictment that's a part of those kinds of choices, is the things we will do for fun. I mean, we will drive miles, and we will be drowsy, and we will lose sleep, and we will go hungry, and we will go in debt. And we will risk life and limb, and we will give our total powers of concentration and wrap up all of our affection in doing something just because it's fun, just because we want to. But where is that want to when it comes to God? Where is that want to when it comes to soul? Where is that want to when it comes to things that matter most in life? And folks, when it all is boiled down to the bare essence of what it's all about one thing and only one thing. And that's my soul. What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul? What if your name was a household name? I mean, when they said your name, people didn't have to see a picture of you because they immediately had a mental image of who you are because your name was just that recognizable. What if you were to go to Habaneros today, and when you walked in, everybody started to whisper because they all knew who you were. The little kids at the table would be tugging on their mama's dress. They'd all be whispering and talking because or they'd come and ask you for your address, your autograph. Probably wouldn't want to ask for your address; that'd be a little stalking. But they want your autograph. What if we were to go to the ballpark this afternoon and some boys are out playing baseball? And one of them's got your jersey on, with your number. And if they were to come to the fence and to talk to you, they would know all about your stats. They would know everything about you. They could quote them from heart. How many famous people have taken their life because everybody knew their name, but they were still lonely and insecure? Fame was just ashes in their mouth. Now we know that, don't we? I mean, we know that about how fame can corrupt. We know that about how fame is not real. We know how passing it can all be. We know that if we were the most famous, if we were a household name, that if we are famous with men but God doesn't know our name, then what have we got? Not a thing. And yet here's the compromise that we'll make. Not so that we can be world famous, but just so that we can fit in with 2 or 3 guys, we'll take a drink. Just so that we're not left out, we'll take a whiff. We'll take a smoke. Just because we get a laugh at the lunch table, we'll tell a joke. Just so that we can find acceptance with someone else, we will run down somebody else's name because we want to know that we're a part of the group and that we're against them too. We're on the same team. And it's not so that we can be world famous. It's just so that we can be popular with a few small minds whose opinion doesn't even matter. Just because we don't want to say, I was wrong and I'm sorry, we will swell up with pride about our own, because we don't want to lose the fight. And again, it's not to be famous. It's just for the little bit of notoriety that we get, or being a little bit above someone else. And what sense does that make? Because the only reputation that matters is to have a reputation with God. When my folks obeyed the gospel when I was 8 years old, it was the best time in our family's life. My dad had a drinking problem when we lived out in California, and he struggled as a new Christian. He struggled to quit drinking, but he got sober, and he quit cussing. My folks, they talk different and they live different. We drove 45 minutes to the place where we worshiped, and it was never a big deal. It was never a big deal for us to go and to worship with the saints in Oak Ridge, even though we lived way out in the country. And we kids grew up not thinking of that as a big deal because it wasn't a big deal to my folks. And I remember how excited my dad was when he bought me a Bible. It was an American Standard. If you want a Bible not to buy for your kids, don't buy them an American Standard. They won't understand it. It was a hard translation to read. But it was what my dad got for me, and I loved it because he got it for me. And I remember sitting in the back seat of the car as we were coming home from Oak Ridge and reading Genesis 1 and the story of creation for the first time in my life. I remember Louise Woods, who was the prettiest Bible class teacher there ever was. She taught our class, and Louise Woods talked about how when John the Baptist was in the wilderness, how he ate locusts and wild honey, and I wanted to go get me some because it just sounded so good. When I was 13, Dad was promoted from being a welder to being an executive at the company where he worked. He was made the production manager for the bellows plant, Pathway Bellows in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. He started entertaining clients that were that were coming to do business with us. And one Friday night, Dad didn't come home. And we didn't want to think about what had happened, and we weren't so concerned about him having a wreck. The thing that we were worried about was him having a drink. And it's what he had. And from that time, my dad's life was just out of control. It just spiraled out of control. He had people that loved him. He had a family. I adored my dad. He had a nice four-wheel drive pickup truck. Had a bass boat with a 75 Johnson on the back of it that we used to take down to the river, go fishing. He had a 3-acre place in the country, a nice home with the best of neighbors on Cave Creek Road where we lived. I remember in those first few months as my dad was leaving God, one of our neighbors had a boat that had caught on fire and had sunk in the little cove over at Dogwood Shores. And Dad and I went to go help him get the boat, salvage the motor out of the bottom of the water. And they'd gotten it to the edge. So we just went to help them get the boat motor out of the water and into the bed of their pickup truck. And nobody in the neighborhood knew about what was happening with Dad. But as we were down in the water trying to get hold of that awkward motor and get it into the bed of the truck, my dad slipped. And when he slipped, he cussed. Jeff Smith was there, and his dad Lynn, and their granddad Lum, and Robert Smith, the brother of Lynn, and a couple other guys from the neighborhood. And none of them had ever heard my dad cuss, because that wasn't who my dad was. But it's who he became. The Lord has been good to my dad. And I want to tell you how good. Drinking put my dad on the street. For 20 years he was homeless. Drinking put my dad into jail. Put him into prison. Meant that he was deported to Canada. For the last 6 years, my dad has been sober because God sent him to Canada to live in a Salvation Army there. And I'm grateful that my dad has been sober these 6 years, but my dad is still not come all the way home. I'm glad I can talk to him on the phone, but he's still not all the way back. Here's the thing I don't want you to miss. It's easy to see the cost for folks that have lived on or are living on Skid Row, isn't it? I mean, it's easy to see because you see that the tragedy is so apparent, it's so physical, it's so immediate. But it doesn't matter if you've got the bass boat still. It doesn't matter if you've got the four-wheel drive pickup truck. It doesn't matter if you are an executive instead of a welder. It doesn't matter if you still got your family. It doesn't matter if you still got your son. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have a good reputation in the community. It doesn't matter. We can have all of those things and be just as lost as the person who has nothing. Everything can look good on the outside, but things be just as broken in our soul and in our relationship with God. We got to get the fact that the only thing that matters is where I am today with God and where I am tomorrow with Him. What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul? Isn't that simple? One thing matters, that's your soul. And if you leave this life and you've got nothing and nobody, but your soul is right with God, then you have succeeded at life. But if everybody knows your name, and you have everything in the world, but things aren't right with you and God, then you have missed it. You've missed the purpose for all of us in life. What will you do with your soul today? As we stand and sing.